That's astounding. Unshakable. And if you're standing with God, what does that make you? Unshakable. If you're standing with him. Our God, we thank you for the kind of hope that you've given to us. That God, you are unshakable, that never once have you left us that we have to walk alone. That our hope is unfailing. That God, you are unshaken. That we are able to be sure. That we're able to have hope. That we're able to know that you will bring us through. We claim that and we praise you for that in the name of Jesus. Amen. There's an interesting phenomenon that has been observed when tragedy strikes. People report that they essentially become addicted to the media coverage of the tragedy. The Pew Research Center observes that while people are devastated by what's happened, they are also mesmerized by it. And they don't know really how to get on with life, and so they end up being consumed by the coverage, watching over and over again. From natural disasters like tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, Antone's flooding, to the disasters of human depravity like bombings, assassinations, and terrorist attacks. It seems as though the best therapy that we can find is to keep watching the tragedy and the results unfold over and over again. I can't begin to tell you how many times I watched the Twin Towers collapse. Or how many times I relived the collapse of bridges and freeway structures after the San Francisco earthquake. It's kind of like being stuck and not knowing what to do next. So here's a good question to consider. What do you do after you've absorbed a major body blow to your life? What do you do when life falls apart? How do you find the strength to go on after a tragedy hits? It's imperative for us to consider these questions because not all tragedies are going to be out there happening to other people. They're going to be right up here close to home, happening to you and those who are close to you. You and I are going to face tragedies in life. Death happens. If you're married, it's likely you or your spouse will die first, and the other will be left. Children will have parents pass away. Parents will have children die. What do you do when they're here one moment? Gone the next. Death happens. Life happens. You may be planning to get married when your fiance breaks off the engagement. You may be steamrolled when your spouse tells you they're leaving and not coming back. You may have a doctor visit where it ends with a diagnosis that says terminal. Or there can just simply be an accident that throws everything out the window. All the plans you had for the future, they are gone in that moment. How do you find the strength to go on? There's a man in the Bible who asked this question in different ways when tragedy threatened to overwhelm his life. His name is Jeremiah. We dropped in on Job last week. We dropped in on Job in the midst of personal tragedy. We're going to look at Jeremiah today during one of the most horrendous periods in the history of God's people. The southern kingdom of Judah has finally been captured by an enemy nation. Babylon has come in. They have ravaged the nation. They have made the people slaves. They've taken the best of those, like Daniel and his friends, and they've taken them back to Babylon. And so for 40 years, Jeremiah preaches. Let me say that again. For 40 years, Jeremiah preaches, trying to get the people to turn back to God before it's too late. And in the process, he is ridiculed, he is tortured. And out of a broken heart, he writes a broken book, actually 2 broken books, about a broken nation. During his lifetime, Jeremiah watched horrendous atrocities inflicted upon the people of God. And he wrote all of that down in the books of Jeremiah and Lamentations. He wrote what he lived, and he lived what he wrote. In the middle of that national tragedy, he wrote these words in Lamentations, Lamentations 3. We have suffered terror and pitfalls, ruin and destruction. Streams of tears flow from my eyes because my people are destroyed. Earlier in chapter 2, he had written, I have cried until the tears no longer come. My heart is broken. My spirit is poured out in agony as I see the desperate plight of my people. Little children and tiny babies are fainting and dying in the streets. So if you're here today, feeling a little low, it simply means, like Jeremiah, you have a heart that can be broken. As Jeremiah agonized over how to find enough strength to keep on going, again, to keep on going for 40 years, God gave him 4 actions to help. The first action is this: focus your attention on God. The first thing to do in order to move on to what's next is to focus on God. You have to take time to be quiet. You need to get alone with God so you can just simply be with him and listen to him. Listen for him to talk to you. Jeremiah wrote, when life is heavy and hard to take, go off by yourself. Enter the silence. Bow in prayer. Don't ask questions. Wait for hope to appear. Don't run from trouble. Take it full face. The worst is never the worst. And so God invites you to meet with him. He wants to talk with you. He wants to talk to you many times more than we want to listen. I'm old enough to remember the busy signal. How many of you remember the busy signal? When you called, if someone was already on the line, you'd get that annoying busy signal. Our current equivalent is not having any cell service. On our recent trip, we were a couple of times on the island of St. John where we got, and you look and you go, no service. What do you do then? You can't connect until you move back into an area where service is once again available. Now, both of these analogies describe what our relationship with God is often like. Sometimes we are just so busy with all of the stuff that we do that God gets a busy signal when he tries to connect with us. At other times, we close ourselves off. Signal lost. It's not because God moved, it's because we moved. Either way, we miss out on that relationship that God wants to have with us, where he can connect with us and talk with us. And so I wonder, when was the last time you found a quiet place where you could just sit down and be quiet for 10, 15 minutes? My guess is some of us have never done that in our entire lives. To just sit in quiet 10 to 15 minutes in the presence of God, asking him, Father, is there something you want to say to me right now? And then just to stop and to pause and to take time to listen. If you want to have the strength to go on, I want to challenge you. Ooh, the way I wrote this down, I think it's a little unrealistic now. I was going to challenge you to set aside 10 to 15 minutes every day this next week. And as soon as I say that, I know many of you are thinking, there's no way I'm going to do every day. So I'm just not even going to try. So let's change it a little bit. Let's shoot for 3 and hope for 2. Okay? Shoot for 3, hope for 2, where you find a place, you select a time when you're going to be there just with God. No other agenda. Ask him if there's anything he wants to say to you. Now, you may read his word for just let's just say 2 or 3 minutes ahead of that. Maybe just pick up, find a psalm, read a few verses, but then just stop and let it just be you alone with God. God, what do you want to say to me? What do you want to say? You'll be amazed at the spiritual strength, You'll be amazed at the energy that God's Spirit brings to you, the sense of direction that begins to take shape in your life. Okay, aim for 3, hope for 2. Who wants to do every day? There's a few who are shooting for every day. You go for it. But you're listening for God. It will help us to focus on God. It's the first thing to do when you're in the middle of or just coming out of tragedy. Focus on God. Jesus said the same thing as Jeremiah. Look at how Jesus, his instructions, as they're paraphrased, what he teaches the disciples to do. Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense his grace. And so Jesus offers that valuable advice. Find a quiet, secluded place so you aren't tempted to impress other people as you pray. Now, I was told the yellow doesn't show up. Shows up? Okay, you can read it. Okay, good. Find a quiet, secluded place so you aren't tempted to impress other people as you pray. Do you ever do that? You know, you begin to fashion your prayers before your mouth's open because you want to make sure it sounds good for other people. Now think about it. What do those other people really matter? It's you and God. Or this happens, you listen to someone else's prayer and you go, boy, they really know how to pray. That is so impressive. I'm not following that. Find that quiet, secluded place. That's not going to happen. Second, be there as simply and honestly as you can be. Just be you. Talk to God like you would talk to a friend. Be open, be real, be you. And what are we told? The focus will shift. The focus will shift from you to God. His grace will flow. Tragedies can be beneficial because our focus does shift from our daily concerns and the interest comes to things that really matter. I know Judy was just flipping through some of the pictures from Antone's last night when the water flowed into the restaurant. You know, there may have been somebody there looking at the menu at that point going, boy, what am I going to... And soon they're in a dinghy being taken out of the restaurant. Focus shifts. I came across a piece that told of a difference one day made in America. That day was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. It reads this way. On Monday, people watched a TV show called Fear Factor. On Tuesday, we experienced it. On Monday, people were gossiping about celebrities. On Tuesday, we were celebrating heroes. On Monday, people debated diversity. On Tuesday, they demonstrated unity. On Monday, people lined up to watch movies. On Tuesday, we lined up to give blood. On Monday, people felt invincible. On Tuesday, we felt vulnerable. On Monday, Democrats and Republicans were debating. On Tuesday, they were holding hands and singing God Bless America. On Monday, people packed into clubs to party. On Tuesday, we packed into churches to pray. On Monday, people thought they would live forever. On Tuesday, we saw how fragile life is. On Monday, parents and children fought. On Tuesday, they hug each other like never before. On Monday, people emailed jokes. On Tuesday, we were emailing prayers. On Monday, people focused on themselves. On Tuesday, we focused on God. Tragedies tend to do that. They slow us down. All you have to do is go to the emergency waiting room to feel life slow down. It really does slow down in the emergency room as you wait and you wait and you wait some more. That's not all bad. We need to slow down. I came across another piece. It's a poem. It's a poem like modern, not everything rhymes. It makes such a great prayer. I'm just going to ask that we bow now before our God. And I'll use this to lead us before his throne of strength and grace in prayer as we focus on him. Slow me down, Lord. Ease the pounding of my heart through the quieting of my mind. Steady my hurried pace with a vision of the eternal reach of time. Give me in the midst of the confusion of my days the calmness of the everlasting hills. Break the tension of my nerves with the soothing music of the singing streams that live within my memory. Help me to know the restoring power of sleep. Teach me the art of taking minute vacations, like slowing down to look at a flower, to pet a stray dog, to chat with an old friend or to make a new one, to watch a spider build a web, to smile at a child, or to read a few lines from your word. Remind me each day that the race is not always to the swift, that there is more to life than just increasing its speed. Let me look upward into the branches of the towering oak and know that it grew great and strong because it grew slowly and well. And help me to focus on you. Not my loss, not my worries, nor my stress. In Jesus' name, amen. Focus your attention on God, and then ask God to remove your fears. When tragedy strikes, we know all kinds of emotions. There's grief, there's confusion, there's doubt, there'll be frustration, anger. They're all emotions with which we need to deal. There's one emotion more deadly and damaging than all the others, and that one is fear. Think about it. Grief doesn't paralyze you. Confusion doesn't paralyze you. Doubt, anger, frustration, they don't paralyze you. Fear does. If you're going to move on with life after a tragedy, you're going to have to deal with the root of the fears and the anxieties. Jeremiah prays this way: I called out your name, O God, called from the bottom of the pit. And he was literally in a pit, up to his armpits in mud. You listened when I called out. Don't shut your ears. Get me out of here. Save me. You came close when I called out. You said, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Ann Landers spent her life offering advice to readers who wrote her letters. On average, she estimated she received about 10,000 letters a day from people seeking her advice about how to live life. She was asked one time what the most common problem was that people ask about. Without hesitating, she said, fear. Everyone has fears. Some of them are hidden. We may pretend like we don't have fears, but they are there. We may cover them up. We might medicate them. We might try to ignore them. But the truth is, we all have fears. Over the years, I've thought about those great words that FDR spoke to rally the nation during World War II. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. They were great words. I understand what he was saying, but I'm not sure that they're always true, because there are many things to fear, at least that cause fear. You know it because you do. You know because you have those fears. And if you're going to get on with life, you need to deal with fear. Thankfully, the Bible doesn't ignore or avoid the topic. It gives us 3 antidotes to fear. They are truth, love, and faith. Now, we're only going to be able to do a short overview on each of these, so just be ready and hang on. Truth is the first antidote. Jesus said, you will know the truth will set you free. Now, how is that an antidote to fear? Most fears are based on ignorance or false information. They're based on lies, misunderstandings, and prejudices. We're told that people are born with only 2 fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. That means all other fears are acquired. They are learned. Well, many things we learn, they're not true. Things that we've learned about ourselves, about God, about life. We've built our lives on false assumptions, on misbeliefs, and the more the misbelief, the greater the fear factor. Because fear is false evidence appearing real. You can't get rid of fear by just saying you're not going to be afraid anymore. You have to replace fear with truth. While you've learned all your fears, the good news is they can be unlearned or at least counteracted. Read the Bible, absorb God's truth, invite His Spirit to work in your life. Truth is an antidote. Love is a second antidote to fear. The Bible tells us about the power of God's love. In 1 John 4, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out, it casts out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The more of God's love, the more you know of God and His love, the more you realize that He's not out there just to punish you, He is there to bless you, and the more confident you're going to be, and the result is you'll be less afraid. Now, look at this concept from another vantage point. If you have a lot of fear in your life, what does that tell you? If you have a lot of fear, what does it tell you? It tells you you don't know God as well as you might, and you're not as close to Him as He would like you to be. When love is greater than fear, you act. What motivates a parent to run out into the street into oncoming traffic when a child is there? Love, the love that parent has for that child, means that they will risk their life to be able to help that child. Fill your life with God's love, and you will find that the fear starts to fade. Faith is the third antidote. Faith doesn't eliminate the feelings of fear. Faith gives you the courage to do what you need to do in spite of your fear. Faith empowers you to move against fear in spite of how you feel. Now, one more thought here. Where do we get truth, love, and faith? What's the source of these three antidotes to fear? It is that relationship with God. The better you get to know God, the more you will know, the more you will experience His truth, His love, and His faith. The antidote for handling fear in your life isn't found in a formula. It's found in a person, and His name is Jesus. The better you get to know Him, the less fear you're going to have. As David testified, I prayed to the Lord, and He answered me. He freed me from all my fears. Some of you may be here today because God brought you here, so He could say this to you. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. Don't get anxious. Actually, that's the way they're usually put in English. When you go back into the Greek and you look at how Jesus was actually talking to the people, the way He put it was, stop being afraid. Stop worrying. Stop being anxious, because He knows that we do become afraid, that we do worry, that we do become anxious. What He tells us here, I'm here to help you with all of that. Rely on me. So now we come to the third action. After we focus our attention, after we ask God to remove our fears, we need to believe that God will restore us. Believe that God will restore you, because He can and He will restore. Trust Him to do what He says He will do. Believe that God can help you to recover. Trust God to bring good out of bad. Jeremiah did that. After all that had happened, this is what he prayed. Restore us, O Lord, and bring us back to you again. Give us back the joys we once had. You see, God specializes in new beginnings. He helps people start over after crises and tragedies. He gives us a fresh start, a new direction. He does that when we're saved, often referred to as being born again. Talk about new starts and new direction. He also does this at some of those points in our lives that test our souls. God is in the business of restoring joy. David wrote in Psalm 27, I would have despaired unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Where would we be if we didn't believe that we could experience the Lord's favor in our lives? We'd be in big trouble. That's where we'd be. So let's get down to some brass tacks for just a few moments. When tragedy strikes, what should you do? First, here's 3 things you shouldn't do. Number one, don't repress your grief. Now, we worked that one over pretty well last week. Tell God how you feel. Don't try to hide it. That only hurts you more. Don't repress your grief. Secondly, don't resign from life. Now, what does that mean? Let me just give you 3 phrases claiming I'll never. I think you'll understand. I'll never trust anyone again. I'll never let anyone touch me again. I'll never allow myself to become so vulnerable that I can be hurt. Never, ever again. Building a wall around yourself means you're just going to exist instead of live. And then thirdly, don't retreat into resentment. Now, you may think your resentment is going to get that other person, that they're going to get what's coming to them. It doesn't work that way. They might not even know. It only hurts you. It makes the problem worse, prolongs the pain. We're all going to hurt along the way. The majority of us here, we could testify that we've been hurt. It's not going to help to keep replaying it over and over. That only keeps the pain fresh. The bitterness will eat you alive. It's poison in your system. Learn to forgive, let go. The other person may not deserve forgiveness, but you do. You do. Now, 2 things you can do. Number 1, accept what can't be changed. There is so much in life we don't have any control over. You can't do anything about it. The way to freedom is through acceptance. Acceptance leaves you able to experience peace. It's the key to getting on with life. No matter how much you wish that it could be different, it's not going to change. Let the past be the past by faith. Faith doesn't pretend that things aren't like they are. Faith accepts the facts of life, it accepts reality, and it refuses to give in to discouragement and despair. Faith does that because we believe that God is with us and He is for us. As Paul wrote, if God is for us, who can be against us? And then secondly, focus on what's left, not what's lost. When we focus on what we've lost, we make ourselves vulnerable to depression, don't we? Focusing on what's left leads to gratitude. Gratitude defeats depression. It's impossible to be grateful and depressed at the same time. So when you're depressed, start making a list of things for which you can thank God. The clouds will part. God's light will shine. What was the old song? Count your many blessings. Name them one by one. From inside the belly of the fish, and that's about as dark as it gets, Jonah prayed this: when I had lost all hope, I turned my thoughts once more to the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Now, I need to warn you, it may take some time. You don't get over tragedy instantly. Jeremiah, 40 years. The good news is it wasn't 41. It takes time to heal. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes trust. Jeremiah wrote in Lamentations 3, the Lord is kind to everyone who trusts and obeys Him. It is good to wait patiently for the Lord to save us. While you wait, you can be sure that God knows what is happening. God cares. And add that to the fact now that He has the power to do something about it. You can make it if you trust Him, and you'll be able to go on. 4th action then. Remember what never changes. Remember what never changes. Life changes all the time. Tragedy only increases the speed of change. Some change happens like that, and you should never take anything for granted. There are, however, some things in your life that will never change, and you need to anchor yourselves to those places. 3 realities that never change. Number one, God is still in control. He still sits on the throne. Just because something has happened to you, it doesn't mean that God has been pushed off the throne, and I have to remind myself of that at times. He still calls the shots in spite of tragedies and human choices. God has given us a free will, so we sometimes make bad choices and people get hurt. While God doesn't control our choices, He does oversee how things work out. As mentioned earlier, there is so much we can't control. You could make a list, but I will leave you to make your own mental list of things that you can't control in your life. Truthfully, I can't handle everything that comes into my life. God can. The secret of crisis control is Christ control. Here's what Jeremiah says, no matter what happens. Our hearts are sick and weary. Our eyes grow dim with tears. But Lord, you remain the same forever. Your throne continues from generation to generation. Second fact we need to hang on to, the second thing that doesn't change is God still loves me. Other people may stop loving you. God never does. And you may have had to claim this truth and just hang on to it more often than you would like. Because it seems like people have just let you down and let you down and left you. God never does. Let's go back to Jeremiah and the much-loved passage about how great His faithfulness is. Jeremiah 3. The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. That's where Jeremiah found himself, and then he was able to write this. Yet I still dare to hope. When I remember this, the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great, great is His faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. That may be what you needed to be here for today. To be able with your own lips to be able to say, God, your faithfulness is great. You never, ever let go. That means accidents are not punishment. People seem to think at times that accidents are God's way of getting even with us. He's not like those petty idols that other people worshiped in the Old Testament. Don't blame God for bad decisions that other people make. That's not God punishing you. That's people making bad decisions and doing bad things. God will never stop loving you. And that allows us to be able to say this: God is all I need. God's all I need, all I have needed. God, your hand has provided. Now here's the rub with this final point. You're never going to know the full extent of that truth until God is all you have. That's when it will be real. You may have experienced that desperate place in the past. You may be there right now. It may be out there waiting for you. You may have experienced in the past, and you know it's going to happen again. So you need to absorb these truths. You need to make them part of who you are on a daily basis. You're going to need to recall this. I'd suggest, just in case, take the notes from the last 2 weeks. Put them in your Bible someplace, because someday you may need to pull those out. We end this morning with these final words from Jeremiah. Lamentations 3:24. Deep in my heart I say, the Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him.